Coming up, we recap week 3 and a little message for the Mets. So week 3 saw its fair share of surprises. You guys saw my picks Friday, and we went 9-7 during them. And one of them that I got wrong is the team that I root for. The New York Giants played the Cleveland Browns over the weekend, and even though I thought the Giants were not going to be completely outmatched in this game, I actually thought it was a game they could win. I did not pick them because I had seen nothing this year to make me believe that the Giants were going to beat a team that was in the playoffs with their defense last year. Now, I think Cleveland is different, especially confirmed after this weekend, with the New York Giants pretty much dominating them in the first half. And I got to tell you, when I first saw the fumble and Deshaun Watson's touchdown to Amari Cooper right after that, then the 3-and-out, then the stepping off sides on 3rd and 2 following that 3-and-out, it looked really bad. Really, really bad. And Daniel Jones absolutely getting saved by that roughing the passer penalty that, I'm going to be honest, did not really look like roughing the passer. I didn't think it affected the throw that much. It's one of the worst throws I'd ever seen him throw. And in that moment, I was so emotional that I tweeted, Daniel Jones is garbage. And do I regret it? No, not really. Obviously, this is sports, football. It's garbage at football right now. And then he proceeded to make me look like a clown, the clown that I am, because he was excellent in this game, and it is by far his best game of the season. And it's pick me up. Very much needed to pick me up because he was better in week 2, but they didn't win. He played against a really good defense and played very well. And the team looked good around him. And he seems to have found his new favorite target, Malik Neighbors. Now, I always got annoyed at the criticism of Joe Shane for drafting Malik Neighbors because he just seemed like a sure thing coming out of college. Like, well, the Giants need a quarterback. The Giants need a quarterback. Well, drafting a quarterback for the sake of drafting a quarterback is not very smart. I don't think. So when he realized he wasn't going to be able to get May, and they were in a spot like number 6 where they couldn't draft somebody that they were for sure comfortable with. We saw JJ McCarthy was a name being floated out there. Why draft a quarterback just to draft one? They drafted a stud wide receiver that looks like he could be special, and that is one of the best games that I've ever seen from a rookie wide receiver. And Malik Neighbors, I think, was proven that I think he's proven the last 2 weeks they really nailed that pick. I mean, I don't think you can even discuss that. And that gives me faith in Joe Shane moving forward. And I think yesterday, and I think the game on Sunday was needed for Brian Daboll because once again, they get off to a bad start. Similar to last year, they didn't get off to a good start. Jones looked incompetent in week 1. And Brian Daboll seemed to have his team not ready to play again. And it was like, okay, at some point, even though I don't think it's all on him or anything, you do have some responsibility for the team coming out flat every week. And he was really good and he was aggressive. I mean, that 4th-and-1 was needed. And considering a lot of 4th-and-1s did not go for a lot of teams, the Giants going for it on 4th-and-1, a big moment. They saw their season really slipping away very early on in that game. And they went for it and they got it. And they ended up scoring 3 touchdowns in the first half. Now, obviously, I would have liked them to have scored in the second half. Obviously, counting Devin Singletary's run that he slid to ice the game, that kind of counts too. So they would have scored. And their kicker, I mean, Greg Joseph, you could tell even his makes didn't look good. So that's still an area of concern for me. But as far as Malik Neighbors goes, it's an outstanding performance. And Brian Daboll, I think, deserves credit because it's also like the defense looked really good too. And the offensive play calls were great. We all know that's what Daboll's responsible for. But a big concern I also had was the defense. And even though the Browns offense, clearly with Deshaun Watson being one of the worst quarterbacks in the league right now. And He looked really bad, even though like his numbers, you look at his numbers, they don't look like that terrible from the game, and the game was close. It was bad though, watching him sometimes. And even though he doesn't have the best protection, and even though some of his receivers dropped passes, he wasn't very good. And the Giants were blitzing a lot in the first half. I wanted to see more of that in the second half, but the defense looked much better because that's the reason they lost the Commanders game. It wasn't because they didn't have a kicker. It's because they let 7 field goals. I mean, even though a field goal is considered a positive stop, at some point, if you allow 7, it's not positive. So the Giants defense looked much better and they got to the quarterback. And even though Cleveland's offensive line is not good, you still got to do the job. And they did. And so it was a very nice win. I enjoy seeing my team win on Sundays. And the Giants are now in a position where, hey, like they probably could have won in week 2 against a Commander team that doesn't look as bad as many people thought. I didn't think the Commanders are going to be that bad. I think the Commanders are pretty solid, and you saw them beat Cincinnati last night. So maybe the Giants, who lost to the Minnesota Vikings in week 1, who we all didn't think were going to be good, they're proving they're really good. So maybe week 1 wasn't as big of a deal as we thought, and it usually is, you know. And week 2, the Commanders in Washington. I mean, the Commanders are 2-1. And even though I don't think the Commanders are a great team, um, they're not a bad team. So, and the Giants played them well. And now the Giants win in week 3 versus the Cleveland Browns. And you head into this very interesting, juicy matchup versus Dallas on Thursday. So, as far as the New York Giants go, the Browns may stink. We may be overrating this Daniel Jones performance a little bit too much. He is Daniel Jones after all, and there's really nothing he can do this year to make me think that he should be brought back by anything but to just train the next guy. It was still a fun day for the New York Giants. As far as the Cleveland Browns go, this Watson thing is a problem. And Deshaun Watson is going to have to play better. And considering Cleveland made it to the playoffs with basically 5 quarterbacks and Joe Flacco being the best of them, how important is Deshaun Watson? He's important only because quarterback's the most important position. But if they prove that they can do it with any quarterback and probably they could play better, you might have to make the switch to Jameis Winston. I mean, if Watson continues to play this poorly, still a little early, especially because they got the week 2 victory. But I don't know. They don't look that great to me. They look terrible on offense, and all their scores seem to be because of simple field position, easier field position for them. So the Browns may stink. And some people had them as playoff. I mean, they made the playoffs last year, so the assumption was they could make a run in the playoffs this year, be a threat in the division. But they look really bad early on, and there's something, especially with how this Watson trade has turned out. It's very Cleveland Brownie. Cleveland Brownie, indeed. Next, let's talk about Monday Night Football. Man, the Jaguars, they stink. They stink. The Jacksonville Jaguars stink. And I mean, it's been said before, but they're on Bill Belichick alert. They're 100% a Belichick team. This is an organization that will likely give him the control he wants. He probably sees potential because I don't think as bad as Trevor Lawrence has been this year, I don't think he's a bad player. He's not playing well. He's not good. And I think he's not good right now. And I think if you build the right team around him, you can win with him. I don't think he's like a lost cause or anything. We've seen him do stuff that's worthy of being that number 1 overall pick. But as of recently, especially this year, the Jaguars had expectations to compete for the playoffs, and they're 0-3. And not only are they 0-3, they got smacked by the Bills. Smacked by the Bills. And, Trevor Lawrence is supposed to be, at this point in his career, he's supposed to be one of the top quarterbacks. That was supposed to be his growth. He's supposed to be one of the Josh Allens, Patrick Mahomes level. I mean, I don't think no one's Pat Mahomes, but in that conversation of top 5, top 6, top 7 quarterbacks in the league, and he's just not that. Not at this point in his career. The Jaguars stink, and they're officially in Belichick loss. They should be panicking. Their season is over to me. Um, 0-3, and it's just bad. I mean, some of their losses have just been incredibly stupid. And then that Bills game, I mean, that pass he threw around 4 minutes left in the second quarter that DeMar Hamlin picked off was just an atrocious throw, just terrible. And you expect way better from Lawrence. As far as Buffalo goes, Buffalo, I had in this game, and the Bills look really good. And you would like to see them kind of get over that hump because Kansas City has always been in their way. And as much as I think Kansas City's going to the Super Bowl, and I think they are going to three-peat because you just see the way they handle close games, they just handle them so effortlessly. I see that, and I'm like, if they could just play obviously the odds are no team has come back to play to win a third Super Bowl. The Bills will be there and they'll be standing there. And Allen always plays well against Kansas City, but they're gonna have to get it done. And if I'm the Bills, the regular season is very important because you want to have some sort of advantage of any kind versus Kansas City if they, of course, play a game in Buffalo. Um, but as far as just, all this goes, the Bills, they look really good. And I think we overrated their off-season losses. And you got to understand, like with Josh Allen there, I didn't love this Bills team last year, and they still found themselves really good at the end of the season. They're right there. I picked the Jets to win this division. I still think the Jets are going to win this division, but if you had to tell me who's the more dangerous playoff team, it's probably the Bills. Just with their ability, with Josh Allen at quarterback. And, they've proven they can at least, even though they lose to Kansas City, they always give Kansas City a great game. Buffalo is super dangerous, and even though they've beaten the Cardinals, they've beaten a Dolphins team that Tua did play in that game. So, the Dolphins with Tua had some expectations, and Tua was terrible until he got injured, and unfortunately that happened. And then you go and play Jacksonville, who has shown they're not very good, but they're talented. And you come in and you just kill them. I mean, these are what great teams do, and I think we slept on Buffalo as still being a factor in the AFC. Even myself, I guess, if I picked the Jets to win the division, I still thought Buffalo was going to be good, though. I just saw the Jets this being their year to win the division. Um, as far as the other Monday night game, the Commanders and the Bengals, which was a great game. The other one was such a dud. This one was a great Monday night game. And the Bengals are down 0-3. I had Bengals getting their first win against the Commanders in this game, mainly because the Commanders' defense is not very good. But man, the Bengals looked flat again. And I didn't think the Bengals were that great. I didn't pick them going to the playoffs this year, but I expected them to be decent and to not start off 0-3. I don't think you can count them out necessarily yet because they do have Joe Burrow. They have shown a past of getting off to slow starts and rebounding. But I don't know, man. This feels a little different to me. And Jaden Daniels looked as good as any rookie quarterback I have ever seen, personally. He was just to go against Joe Burrow like that, a QB battle that was pretty excellent. And Burrow wasn't bad. It's just this Washington Commander team could score. They can't defend really, but they could score. And Jaden Daniels made some super impressive throws. And the fact that a rookie looks so calm and cool and didn't turn the ball over, which is rare for rookie quarterbacks. I mean, you heard Buck and Aikman talking about it. Super impressive. And the Commanders, I don't think are a playoff team, but the fact that they have this answer on Jaden Daniels, he's playing this well this early. If you're a Commander fan, you got to be jumping out of your seat just watching this kid. He's just unbelievable so far. And, and I really, they didn't score a touchdown in the Giant game, but to still find a way to win that game, you know, um, even for a rookie, even though it's the Giants who aren't necessarily great, it's still impressive. And Jaden Daniels looks legit. And, there's going to be this conversation on if the Bears should have drafted him over Caleb Williams. I don't like having those conversations. It's way too early. I know people sometimes had that conversation a little bit with Andrew Luck and RG3, and it's just a lot of this is just really early, and we always like to overreact, especially because Williams doesn't particularly look great right now. I think that's unfair to Williams, especially because I think Washington is in a better situation organization wise. Um, and yeah, I think he's shown that he's excellent, and that's great for Commander fans. But I don't like having this conversation so early about, oh, maybe Chicago should have drafted him. But the Bengals are in serious trouble. They're 0-3, and they should not be 0-3. They've been in close games. They should have won week one versus New England. That's a very bad loss, especially looking back on it. And even though it's week one, you don't want to overreact. That's a really bad week one loss. You got to get that done. Week two, they're in a tight one with Kansas City, but they lose. And Kansas City's a really good team, and Cincinnati always plays Kansas City really well. One of the best teams to play against Kansas City. But they lost. And you know, you're now all of a sudden 0-2. Now you face a Commander team who you should beat, and you don't get that done either. So now you're 0-3. Now, I believe they play Carolina next week. Um, so that should be a win there. I mean, I don't know. I guess the Andy Dalton Panthers are better, but if I'm just checking here in week four, the Bengals do play the Panthers. That needs to be a win. And then if you're losing that game, I don't know what you do after that. I mean that you have to really do some organizational you're gonna have to have some tough organizational conversations after that. But the Bengals had the Patriots, Commanders, and the Panthers in the first four games of their schedule. Like the fact that they're 0-3 now is really concerning. Um, very concerning. And I think they should be panicking the most. Because even though some people, including myself, didn't have super high expectations for the Bengals, you still have Joe Burrow, and you don't want to waste good Joe Burrow years, especially with his injury history. So those are the Monday Night Football games. I had the Bengals beating the Commanders, and the Commanders won. And I had the Bills beating the Jags, and the Bills won. Um, Talking about Sunday night, the Steelers looked good, and that was a game I had the Chargers in. And with the Chargers, they obviously got unlucky with the Herbert injury. And we'll see if he's going to play in week four. I still like the Chargers, even though they did lose this game, because I thought Herbert looked pretty good. I mean, that Steelers defense is really good. So if the Steelers are going to play that great defense, and Fields isn't going to make mistakes, the Steelers can be very, very good. And they're 3-0, and you know, with if you're in games with that coach, that defense, and you get conservative um quarterback play from Fields, there's no reason to put Wilson in right now. The Steelers can have a very successful season. And their quarterback situation was so bad last year. Them coming in with Fields, who played really well for Chicago last year, including having some debate on if the Bears should keep Fields or draft Caleb Williams, maybe trade the pick, who knows. I still ultimately think the Bears made the right decision, but Fields goes to Pittsburgh, and he's got a much different setup for him. He's got a great defense, he's got a great coach, and he just kind of doesn't need to screw up. And he's in a great spot with Pittsburgh. And at some point, though, Pittsburgh, their lack of offense and their inability to score as much as other teams scares me, which is why I did have them making the playoffs at the beginning of the year. It stops me from thinking of them as like real contenders or anything, even though they're off to a really good start. As far as the Chargers go, they need Herbert. And once Herbert gets back, they'll be fine. I still like them a lot. I still like what I've seen from them. Coming up next, the Vikings and Houston. I had the Vikings in this game, and I feel really good about it. And I think the Vikings are showing they're a playoff team, clearly. I mean, the fact that they smacked Houston, who I wasn't as high on as other people. A lot of people th thought Houston could be a Super Bowl contender. I see them more as like a playoff contender. Think they'll get in. That division's very weak. Think they'll win the division and maybe make some noise there. But seeing them as a top tier contender, even though we love to get excited with young quarterbacks that play really well early on, like CJ Stroud, got to pump the brakes, I think, a little bit. I think we also overrated a little bit the Stephon Diggs acquisition. And listen, we'll see what happens with Houston. I did pick Minnesota in this game because Minnesota has looked really, really good. And they were at home and they looked awesome. And it makes me feel a little better as a Giant fan because maybe the Vikings are just really fucking good. I mean, it could just be that. And this was seeing what we're getting from Sam Darnold. And this coaching staff has been fantastic so far. I think they're making a case for the best coaching staff in the league. And to see what Minnesota's doing, you have to take them seriously. And it's going to be a very interesting NFC playoff race, especially if the Giants beat the Cowboys on Thursday. Because if that happens, then you just got a mishmash of NFC teams that can kind of beat anybody. And that goes from like even some division winners, like whoever wins the NFC East. I don't think anybody loves any of those teams, and one of them is going to be a division winner. Looks right now looks more like the Eagles, but you haven't really loved what you've seen from the Eagles this year. So this NFC playoff race is going to be fascinating. There's just a lot of teams that saved their seasons this past weekend, and they're going to be facing these other teams that got off to really good starts but aren't perfect, like Seattle, for example, being 3-0. But as far as the Vikings go, I think Houston is still fine. Like I said, that division is not hard to win. They will get in, they'll be interesting. But the Vikings, this is a coming out party for them. They look great. Next, this of course happens after I pick the Tampa Bay Buccaneers to represent the NFC in the Super Bowl, and I won't back off of it. But my other thought of the other team I was thinking about putting in there looks a lot better. The Broncos came in and absolutely torched the Bucs. I don't really understand how this happened. This is Sean Payton's first win in September as the head coach of the Denver Broncos. He was 0-5 up to this point. And the Broncos and Bo Nix took care of business, and the Buccaneers just looked very bad offensively. And I have no explanation for this game. Sometimes this game just kind of happens. But I think if you're a Broncos fan, you're feeling good. If you're a Bucks fan, I still think they'll be a playoff team. I still like what I've seen from Baker so far this year. I still think they're dangerous. But the Broncos coming in Tampa, don't love it. Don't love it. Don't love how they played. And that's concerning if you're me, or if you're a Tampa fan, if you had expectations for this team. Next game, Packers Titans. Listen, the Titans stink. They're just not good. Um, Poor quarterback play. They're talented in ways offensively, but they're just kind of meh. And when you have the Titans going up against a Packer team, even with Matt LaFleur, I think has proven he's a really good coach. There was questions about him when Rodgers was there, but it seems like with Jordan Love and really any quarterback he's had recently, they've looked really good. I mean, Jordan Love has been out. He's been working with backups, and they're still taking care of business in these games. In fact, the game where Jordan Love did play, they lost. So Jordan Love will come back. I think will be good for them. And this is a dark horse Super Bowl team, the Green Bay Packers. I know it's just the Titans, but the fact that they've won the last 2 weeks without the quarterback, and listen, the Colts aren't great either, but I think the Packers are dangerous. And if you get Jordan Love in there, you got something to really root for if you're Green Bay. And I don't love Detroit. I don't love San Francisco right now. I don't love the Cowboys. I don't love the Eagles. Like, there's going to be a lot of NFC teams that are going to be weird and spunky this year. And I just said the Bucks looked terrible Sunday versus the Broncos, a team they should beat. And if you're the Packers, you're like, hey, let's get Love in here. We got a shot. We're good. We got our quarterback. And you come in with good coaching and the way they're kind of just resilient through this injury. It's impressive. And Green Bay was dangerous in the playoffs last year, too. So, someone to take into account as a real NFC contender. They should not be looked at, uh, lightly. As far as the Titans go, they stink. And, at some point, they're going to have to stop being in this mediocre spot. Um, Tennessee. Very bad start for Tennessee, even though they have had moments where they look like they could pull out wins, especially that Jet game. They're just not good enough. Next, Colts beat the Bears. Colts get their first win. I picked the Colts in this game. Yeah. Um, I saw the Colts getting this game mainly because I think the Bears, even though they won in week one, I don't see them as that great. And they were 1-1 going into this. Colts are 0-2. Colts are hungry for their first win. They're at home. Caleb Williams really hasn't looked that great. And yeah, they got their victory, and that's cool for them. Let's talk about the Bears angle of this. This Caleb Williams thing, here's my thoughts about this. I did think we needed to pump the brakes on how good Caleb Williams was going to be coming into the NFL, especially because he was going to Chicago. And I know Chicago looked good towards the end of last year. That's why the whole Fields conversation started. But I'm just going to defend Caleb Williams a little bit here. Even though he hasn't looked great, and maybe media narratives and scouts overhyped him coming in just a bit. I'm not going to sit here and say he was a mistake pick when Jaden Daniels is playing great. Playing great in Washington right now. I'm not going to say he's a mistake pick yet or anything stupid. It's way too early. And I just don't love this chatter around him right now because you got rid of Justin Fields, who's having success with Pittsburgh. I still think it was the right move to bring Caleb Williams. He's your number one pick. The talent level is just really high over there with Williams, and I think you just take the chance. And you got to take advantage of this Panthers situation. I mean, the Panthers trade was awful for Carolina and really helped Chicago. So you got to take advantage of that. Caleb Williams was not the bad move, and especially with Jaden Daniels. Listen, look at Daniels right now. Look at the weapons he has. Look at the coach he has. It's not a bad situation to be in. So he's really good and he's in a really good situation right now. It looks like he has like everything he needs. So I don't think Williams has that. So we got to see Williams get there. And he's gonna have his growing pains this year. But I don't think this is by any means like he's not going to be good or anything. He'll be a good player. I just don't think he may be as good as like everyone was saying he was going to be. But to rip on him this early, saying the Bears might have made a mistake is unfair. He's got time to take care of that. And we'll see what happens. But a lot of the times, a lot of rookie quarterbacks struggle early on. They get going, and usually by year three, you kind of know if they're good for your organization. And we'll see what happens with Caleb Williams. But I don't like getting on him this early. Here was the craziest game of the weekend. Or one of my one of the big upsets. I thought Raiders coming off a big win versus San Francisco, which I still don't know how they won. They go to they play Carolina and they get smoked. And here was the conversation because I want to talk mostly about Carolina on this because the Raiders, they're not very good. It's plain and simple. I mean, they're not very good. Carolina makes this big news this week when they decide to bench Bryce Young and bring in Andy Dalton. And there was a lot of talk this week about Bryce Young being one of the busts, one of the biggest busts, whatever, his height, all this stuff. But then there was another conversation with like, this isn't Bryce Young's fault. This is Carolina's fault. They put him in a bad situation, blah, 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 da, 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 da. And there's always that conversation too with young quarterbacks when they come in and they stink like right away. And my thoughts were after watching a little bit of this Andy Dalton game versus the Raiders is, you know what? Maybe Bryce Young just stinks. And that's okay. And maybe he's just learning right now. But this whole idea that Carolina screwed him, I heard someone say if that were Tom Brady coming in or Aaron Rodgers, it's like I just look at it like this. The great quarterbacks always kind of find a way. Even though they have their moments, they might have their moments of struggling. There's usually something you see that you're like, okay, good. And Bryce Young could go to another team and have success. But at some point, and we saw this a lot with the Jets with Zach Wilson. They screwed Zach Wilson. They screwed Zach Wilson. It's like maybe these guys just aren't good and they're not NFL quarterbacks. Could that be the thing too? They may be less bad in other places, but maybe Bryce Young just stinks. Maybe Bryce Young just couldn't see over those big linemen. Because I mean, some of the decisions he makes, if you watch him, like he made one throw into clear double coverage, and it was really bad, you know. And he's just, I just think he's just not very good. And I think like we don't want to be too mean to these players and we want to give them chances and opportunities and we want to have empathy and I get it. But after watching Andy Dalton just murder the Raiders, who aren't good, don't get me wrong, I just know Bryce Young is not doing that. Like I just everything Andy Dalton did, Bryce Young is not doing. He didn't do that. So maybe he just stinks. Just my thoughts. And we try to find excuses for some of these guys and maybe he's just not very good and he needs to be better. And we instead we blame the organization all the time because it's easy to. They put him in a bad spot, blah blah blah. He's getting all this heat, but the organization deserves some blame. I'm not saying they don't deserve any blame, but maybe just Bryce Young, maybe they deserve blame for picking him because maybe he's just not very good. And I'm just being real. I mean, I had no expectation for Carolina to look anything like they did Sunday, and they did. And sometimes weird things happen in the NFL, but I think we got to be a little bit careful when criticizing athletes, but to the go as far as the extent of being like, oh, let's blame everything on the organization. It's ridiculous. Bryce Young maybe just isn't good. Coming up next, Seahawks kill Miami. This was not shocking to me. Miami looks lost right now, and it's because they don't have a quarterback. They have no quarterback to throw Tyreek Hill the ball. They couldn't beat good opponents before, even with quarterback play, like with Tua. And it looks like Tua's coming back, which is dangerous. And we'll see what happens there. But the Dolphins just kind of look lost. And even with Tua this year, I didn't think they were going to be a playoff team. And without him, they just aren't a good team. And there's nothing Mike McDaniel could do. They're just not good right now. And Seahawks, they're 3-0, but it's a very phony 3-0 to me at least. I don't trust Seattle. I didn't have them making the playoffs this year, and they're starting off 3-0, which is good for them and whatever. But I don't see them as a playoff team yet. I need to see more from Seattle. I think that 3-0 could be once they face some better competition, could be different. Um, Next, Ravens, Dallas. Baltimore's I'm not worried about. Baltimore started off the year 0-2. Dallas is a tough week 3 opponent, but they beat Dallas and they almost blew it. They had Dallas looking terrible at one point. They almost blew it, but they got to find ways to close out these games. Baltimore, I'm not worried about. I still think they win the division. I still think they're a contender in the AFC. Not picking them to win by any means, but they're a contender. And I think they'll be fine. I think they showed you they'll be fine. They just got to find a way to close out these games. They needed a little bit of a break in the schedule, I guess. But as far as Dallas goes, you have to be concerned. Their defense is really bad. And I think while I'm picking Dallas to beat the Giants this week, you never know with these Thursday night games. And Dallas has owned the Giants for years now. Like they just can't beat Dak Prescott. They just can't do it. And things might be different Thursday. And if the Giants beat the Cowboys Thursday, because that MetLife, there'll be a lot of Cowboy fans there though. That makes things very interesting in the NFC. I don't think it'll happen. I think it'll be close maybe, but the Dallas defense was really good last year and got to Jones a lot. And that was a big part of the reason they were they won 40-0. Wasn't even Dak was doing anything crazy. The Giants couldn't get anything going offensively because the Dallas defense was so good. And the Cowboys offense just kind of took care of business, and eventually it became really bad because the Giants defense at that point was failing to tackle people. Right now the Giants got some juju. They're playing a little better. Dallas knows they need to win, but maybe won't be able to pull it out. I mean, we'll see. I have the Giants in this game. I have the Cowboys in this game, but the Giants are going to make it tough. And I think a lot of people may actually pick the Giants in this game, even though they've yet to beat Dallas or even really be close with Dallas, if we're being real. So I'm concerned for the Cowboys. I picked the Cowboys to win the division, and so far they do not look good. And the thing that the Giants and the Cowboys have in common is their only win this year is against the Browns. So we're gonna find out about these teams, I think, a little bit on Thursday, and it's gonna be an interesting game. Because before I was not excited for it. I was not excited to get my get the Giants get their ass kicked by Dallas for the millionth time in the last few years. I wasn't looking forward to it, but now I am, and it should be a really fun game. Next, Lions get a good win on the road versus solid Cardinals team. I think this Cardinals team is showing you that they're good, and the Lions are good. I mean, I think what you're seeing with Detroit is simply just they're going to be there as a contender in the NFC. There's nothing that changed my opinion though about the Lions. I don't know if I trust them. I'm really concerned about how their season ended last year. And even though San Francisco doesn't look like the San Francisco of last year, mostly because of injury, I don't trust that Detroit is going to be the team that overtakes them. I mean, I'd love to see it, especially with the history of the Lions, but there's nothing even that game did to me. To me, they're just a better team than the Cardinals. And even though it was at Arizona, the Lions are a better team. Cardinals are good though, and they're another team in the NFC that is going to be there and competing for a playoff spot. Just makes this race even more exciting. Here's one that shocked me. Rams shocking the 49ers. That shocked me. I was blown away by Matt Stafford. He's really just a big reason why people had the Rams as an NFC contender and a dark horse for the Super Bowl. They've been ravaged with injuries to start this year, and it sucks for them. But they could have just rolled over versus San Francisco and be like, "Oh, San Francisco's better than us. We'll go down 0-3." No, they didn't. Now they're 1-2, and they're again going to be one of these NFC teams that are going to be like, "Hey, we can make the playoffs. We can compete for the playoffs." As far as the 49ers go, I'm not worried about them. I think they'll eventually get their act together. These again, injuries are happening early on, and they're having a rough year in regards to that. Just some bad luck there. I still think they'll be there, and I still think they'll be probably the best team in the NFC, probably record wise. We'll see, but I still think it. Um, Not backing off on that, even after a 1-2 start. Rams were desperate to get this win, and they got the win. The Vikings are really good. They beat the 49ers. So it'll be interesting to see how the 49ers bounce back, but I do think they will. I'm not too worried about them for a regular season team. However, this year has expectations because San Francisco has been there and they just can't seem to get over the hump. And it would be a little disappointing if they don't make it back if you're a Niner fan. It's like you made it last year. The NFC doesn't really look too definitive here. You should try and be able to make it back. And maybe with these injuries that are happening now, when some of these guys come back, they'll get more momentum and they'll really start to pull something together. But the Rams needed to win this game, and it saved their season because now you don't just beat a team to save your season and go 1-2. You beat a team that people are seriously calling contenders in the NFC, and that's the team you beat. So you didn't just beat a team; you beat kind of like the team to save your season, and that gives your fan base, once they get some guys back, they'll be looking better, and we'll see. Um, Chiefs are the team to beat. Talking about the Chiefs Falcons. Chiefs are the team to beat. Chiefs are the team to beat until I see anybody else beat them. They easily could be 0-3 and they're 3-0 and it's not shocking. Okay? And people talk about the officiating. Listen, man, like as far as the officiating goes, like we've seen it with these great teams, like they kind of know how to play the whistles a little bit and these great players. And the Chiefs are should have been pass interference, sure, but the Chiefs, I've yet to see a team just beat them, and I need to see it. And they're going to be my pick to repeat and three-peat until I see someone else beat them. Patrick Mahomes is the best quarterback in the NFL. He's the best player in the NFL. Has he looked like incredible necessarily? I mean, not really, but he gets the job done to win the games, of course. Like this is just what happens. Kelsey doesn't even look amazing, and they're still finding ways to win these games. And they beat the Ravens. They beat the Bengals. Okay, they beat the Falcons. So as far as the Chiefs go, they're the team to beat. And there's nothing that's changing my mind. I had the Chiefs in this game. The Falcons have looked better than I thought. And I think the Falcons, again, are an NFC team that is going to be in the middle mishmash of fighting for a playoff spot in a ridiculous, crazy, bonkers, unpredictable NFC with a mishmash of teams that can compete. And there's going to be these teams that have disappointing years. The Falcons could be one of those teams. I liked how they look versus the Eagles. I liked, and listen, they played the Steelers, who are undefeated right now in week one. So maybe the Falcons are just better than I think. And they played Kansas City, played them tight, lost. They play New Orleans in week two. Sorry, they play New Orleans in week four. And while I do think the Falcons, while I do think the Saints are better, I actually think the Falcons may win this game because I think the Saints need to prove to me a little bit more that they can pull up these scoring because they did not. They should have won versus the Eagles and they didn't, and they should have those points that they were putting up in the first 2 weeks did not happen in that game. So that scares me for them. And I actually think the Falcons think they're playing better football now and they'll win in week four. So the Falcons are interesting. The Chiefs are the team to beat. That's the takeaway I got. But as far as the recaps for those games, um, as far as the recaps go for those games, I went 9-7. And I had, let's just see right here. Um, I had the Browns beating the Giants. The Giants obviously beat them. I had the Bills beating the Jags. That happened. I had the Commanders beating. I had the Bengals beating the Commanders. Commanders won. I had the Chargers beating the Steelers. The Steelers won. Had the Vikings beating Houston. Vikings won. Had the Eagles losing to the Saints, and they beat them. Um, I don't know if let's talk about the Eagles. Eagles have an issue because they're not getting great quarterback play and I don't trust that coach. And I kind of can't stand that coach, but there's no secret he had a really good first year. But as far as the coach goes for Philly, I don't think Philly trusts him either. Went with a lot of bold calls on Sunday, and it's a miracle they came out with this win. And that's what makes me concerned about from the Saints' perspective because it's like, they come in the first 2 weeks and they put up all the points in the world, but maybe Dallas isn't that good and maybe Carolina's not good, which is why I'm going with the Falcons this upcoming week. Now, the Eagles, I still don't love what I've seen from them. They're still a flawed football team to me. They have a lot of talent, but they're very flawed. And I think you see it. And they may win the NFC East, but I don't think they're going to be one of the best, that they're going to be the best division winner. Out of those. So it'll be interesting to see. But a nice bounce back, I guess, for the Eagles, even though it wasn't pretty after their disappointing week two loss to Atlanta. But as far as Thursday night goes, just to talk about the future game, the Thursday night game, what I'm going to do is on Friday, I'm doing a two-part podcast. to talk about several topics, but one of them will be guessing the picks for week 4 and recapping the Giants Cowboy game on Thursday. This game is going to be interesting. Give me the Cowboys in this game. I will not be rooting for it, but give me the Cowboys. The Cowboys, I think, understand that they cannot lose this game. And the Giants have not proven to me why I should take them seriously in this game yet. Even though they won on Sunday, they look much better. They look better in week 2. You can create a narrative in your head that the Giants may still be good, even though they're 1-2, maybe because they just got the Vikings are really good, and maybe the Commanders are good, and they just lost those games. Or the Giants still suck. And you're going to find that out against Dallas. And it'll be interesting, but I'll at least be watching the game, which will be really cool. Um, and watching the game with a purpose, having some fun, maybe watching the game. Could be a very fun night. And if the Giants win that game, look out for the Dallas narratives to come out. And that'll be interesting, especially with the fact that they decided to bring Mike McCarthy back this year and kind of run it back with this squad. So that's my pick for Thursday night. Monday night games, the double games, that was okay. Dud completely. I don't mind having 2 football games on a Monday night. Some people hate it. I don't mind it. It's not the end of the world for me. I get it. The stage is bigger if it's just one game, but sometimes with 2 games, if you got one bad one and one good one, it's cool and I like it. I like having as much football as possible in my life. But yeah, those we went 9-7 with our picks. Not too great. I obviously didn't see some of them coming, like the Panthers Raider game. Definitely did not see that coming. But as a Giant fan, walked away from Sunday feeling really good. And if you're a New Yorker, you're a Jet and Giant fan, you're feeling pretty good after this weekend. And that's really nice to see. Now, before I go, I have to give a warning to the New York Mets. The New York Mets have done nothing but shock us this year. Now, I predicted them to compete for the playoffs this year, finish with around 82, 83 wins, and maybe just miss the wild card. Now, granted, that still could happen, but with how the Mets have played since June, considering they're the best team record-wise, I believe, in baseball since June, they got to get it done. This is more than just a feel good story now. This is you got to make it to the playoffs now. That's just what has to be done. And with the New York Mets, they are going up against a team that has given them nightmares for years, mainly the fans, and that's the Atlanta Braves. They're going into Atlanta. They have a 2-game lead over them. They got the Milwaukee Brewers after them, a playoff team. The Atlanta Braves historically have beaten the Mets in situations like this. Most notably recently, 2 years ago, when the Mets were winning the division the entire year and then the Braves swept them and then boom, the Mets went down. The Mets have to win this series. And I really do think it's because they could lose the series, still make the playoffs. They could even get swept and get lucky and still miss the playoffs. That definitely can't really happen. Still make the playoffs, I mean. The Mets cannot lose to the Braves. They cannot lose this series. If you win this series, you're in. Okay. If you lose this series, then the psyche is still kind of there. They cannot get swept, though. And they need to win this series. Beat the demons out. Because despite the feel good story of this season, you got to make the playoffs. Otherwise, you're going to be like that 08 team and that 07 team. Looked like a playoff team, then wasn't. Now, it's a little different with the new added playoff teams. So you got to make it. You got to get it done. You got to finish the job. And I know Lindor's hurt. And it looks like Lindor, even if he does come back, he probably will come back, is not going to look great. He's going to be hurt. He's going to be playing with pain in that back. Acuna's been great. They got to get it done. It's really amazing what they've done to get to this point because they basically had to have won every single game. They've had the hardest remaining schedule. It's really impressive what they've done. But no one's going to remember it if they don't make the playoffs. And in order to make the playoffs, you got to win this series versus the Atlanta Braves. And that's what's at stake here. It's going to be incredible baseball, must-see baseball to see this pennant race, and I'm excited to watch it. I believe this Mets team has what it takes to beat the Brave Demons and move on into the postseason, but they got to do it. And that'll be very interesting. That's going to do it for today, the JB podcast. Later this week, I'm going to do a two-part series, movie-based one, and then give my week 4 picks, plus recap the Giants-Cowboys game. I'll talk to you guys soon. Have a good one.